Chapter 1. In the Garden. In 1732, the first of the Patricks left North Antrim, Ireland, and sailed to the United States, where they settled in Kentucky, but later moved to Indiana, where they became grain farmers. The McKinneys, Irish with just a wee bit of Scotch for flavoring, no doubt, emigrated to Minnesota and later to Wisconsin. My father, Thomas McVeigh Patrick, curly brown hair and snappy blue eyes, was an adventurer. He forsook the security of the rich farm life in Indiana at age 20. Mounting his horse and taking only his knapsack, revolver, and a very few good supplies, he waved farewell to his family and rode off. After 6 or 7 months, he arrived in Seattle, Washington. Once in the far northwest, Tom went to a Presbyterian church where his cousin was pastor. On one particular Sunday, a soprano sang "In the Garden." Tom's eyes were riveted on this lovely girl, raven black straight hair done up with combs, sparkling blue eyes, 5'2" slender figure. Entranced by the attractive young woman, Tom heard not a word of his cousin's sermon. After the benediction, he rushed up to his cousin, Elmer Thompson, and demanded almost breathlessly, "Who was the girl who sang this morning? I want to meet her. I am going to marry her." And so he did. 2 years later, on a cold January 8th, 1902, he married my mother, Martha Jane McKinney. She'd been sent from Wisconsin to Seattle in 1897 by her father upon the tragic death of her mother, a victim of cancer. Once settled in Seattle with her aunt, Martha worked as a fur seamstress for the Hudson Bay Company. When she and Tom were married by Tom's cousin, she became a homemaker. In 1903, a son, Paul, was born, but lived only 3 weeks. It was the next year, 1904, that I was born on July 30th, weighing in at 12.5 pounds. During my early years, I remember listening intently to my mother singing as she did her daily chores. Especially, I was enthralled with music that sparkled from the keyboard as she played the piano. When I was perhaps 3 years old, the Patricks moved to a beautiful 2-story house. Among family photos is a picture of this fine home, the finest the Patricks ever lived in. It had a formal dining room with a picture window overlooking a neat garden. On Sundays, Mother had company for dinner, usually chicken and dumplings. Uncle Ralph and Burke Rothers came often. Ralph Patrick was my adored uncle, the younger brother of my father. He left his home in Indiana and followed his brother west, though not on horseback and alone. His decision to go west was the immediate result of the tragic death of the girl he was to marry. Subsequently, he never married, being true to his first and only love. It was he who showed me what a wonderful thing a hug was. It spoke volumes, though never a word was said. I was the child that Uncle Ralph and his lost love never had. He and Burke Rothers usually brought me a little candy treat. Burke Rothers was a member of the Seattle Presbyterian Church, as were all the Patricks. After church on Sunday, Bert was often invited to have dinner with the family, always chicken and dumplings. After the adults had finished visiting, Bert would take me outside to the porch at dusk and put me on his knee. There, as darkness settled on us, he would point out the constellations, giving me their names. When there was a full moon, we looked at it carefully, for Bert said it had a face. When, to my delight, I saw the face, he sang to me. To this day, 90 years later, I remember that song when I gaze at a full moon. My sweetheart's the man in the moon. We're going to be married next June. And behind some dark cloud where no one is allowed, I'll make love to the man in the moon. From Burke Rothers, I first became aware of the grandeur of our universe. October 21st, 1908, Sarah Viola was born. From an infant, my sister had our father's curly, ringlet-curly, dark brown hair. I, with blonde, perfectly straight hair worn in braids, was intensely jealous of my sister. As an adult, I can understand my feelings, for Sarah was adorable and garnered lots of attention. I, the tomboy, none. My mother made all the garments for my sister and me. Sitting at her sewing machine, she pedaled and sang often her favorite song, "Oh, that will be glory for me." She hummed as she kneaded her bread and cut and shaped cinnamon rolls. Every Friday, the Patricks ate with gusto Boston baked beans with salt pork, brown bread, freshly baked, and delicious apple pie. At age 7, we were passengers on a steamship going from Seattle to San Diego. On the trip from Seattle to San Francisco, out first port of call, the ship was battered by the fiercest storm the captain had ever been through. I knew the captain because of all the passengers aboard. I was the only one not seasick. The captain and crew adopted me. It was a thrilling experience, and I was not frightened even a little bit. The trip from San Francisco to San Diego was uneventful, except for our reunion with my father, whom we'd not seen for 7 months. It was there in San Diego that my brother, Richard, was born in 1914. As a little girl, I knew we were going to have a little sister or brother, and then to Sarah and me, like magic, Mother held baby brother in her arms. I had no idea who helped Mother during the delivery. I, as an adult, believed that my father acted as the midwife. My primary family was in place now with my parents, Thomas and Martha, my sister Sarah, and now my brother Richard. We had some memorable times as a family. For my father, the holiday above all others was the 4th of July. When he had a job, we had fireworks. It was always a big firecracker that was exploded in a large metal can, from which we children were cautioned to stay far away, and we did with our ears muffled. In the evening, there were sparklers, one for each of us. These delighted us, for it set our imaginations on fire. Close to bedtime, there was one rocket, in modern terms, a puny little thing, but to us children, it was thrillingly spectacular. We children were sternly cautioned to stay away from the fireworks. With that admonition, and in order to emphasize his caution, my father took me, probably 5 years old, to see a neighbor boy who was dying from lockjaw, the result of a fireworks burn. Memorial Day was thought of all year, for my grandfather had been in the Civil War with the Union forces. I was constantly reminded of the sacrifice the nation had made. There were different kinds of Christmases for our family. In San Diego, when my father was unemployed, we lived in a shack close to the desert. The Patricks were at their lowest ebb. Mother, weary and 5 months pregnant, gathered Sarah and me close to her. There snuggling, we sang some Christmas carols. Father joined in. Never again were the Patricks so devastated. Never. Later, Christmas time meant that my father would go into the woods and cut a lovely fir tree. No permits were required then. When he came home, he built a stand for the tree, and then, to my delight, he set it up in the living room. Mother then covered the support with old white clothes. It was then that Sarah and I and Richard, when he was older, began making all the decorations for the tree. We strung yards of popcorn, which Father had made in the fireplace. Next, we made yards of garlands from cranberries. Last, we created paper chains, usually white, but once in a while we had little red paper, and that was exciting. Finally, the decorations we had made were placed on the tree by my father, and he also fastened on the fir boughs about 24 candle holder clips. The candles were never lit. One memory haunts me, the time I accidentally knocked over the tree. I expected to be soundly whipped, but wonder of wonders, I was not punished. In one of our homes, there was no forest nearby, so we had no tree. However, my father strung ropes of popcorn and cranberries horizontally from corner to corner in the living room. In the center, where the ropes crossed, a small glass ornament was suspended. All along the ropes were bits of tinsel. That was all we could afford, but it kept the spirit of Christmas alive for our family. The concept of gift-giving was not important for our family in those years, even though we did receive a few small things from Santa. On a Christmas Eve, I, the maid of honor, my sister, Sarah, married Harold Sproul, a young building contractor. Sarah would today be called an interior decorator and landscape designer. Harold built custom homes, and my sister decorated the interiors and landscaped each one. They spent the rest of their lives together, moving from new home to new home in the East Bay, Berkeley area. Their children, Martha and Donald, my niece and nephew, remain very special to me. Donald, the younger, was a whiz at electronics and made that his life's work. Martha was a ballet genius. One summer, when I was doing graduate work at the University of California in Berkeley, College of the Pacific, and University of Southern California, Alice Jane, Bobby, and Barbara spent that time with the Spruills at my father's place in Point Reyes Station. There the cousins worked and played together, thus cementing lifetime friendships. My brother Richard was always very close to my mother, never with our father. Richard was only 12 when Mother passed away at age 46, and after that, life at home for my brother was miserable. And finally, before his senior year of high school, he was invited to come and live with Burton and me. That year was one of the very few happy years in Richard's life. He was active in school, playing football and basketball, and was elected student body president of Dunsmuir High School. After graduation, Richard bid us farewell and left for Marin County, where he attended the junior college. In school, he met Charlotte Morris, an outgoing, warm-hearted young woman just Dick's age. They fell in love and were married in 1936 at the beautiful Morris Mansion in Oakland, California. Charlotte endeared herself to me as well as my 3 children. She quickly became a good and close friend, even though we were only able to visit in person 3 or 4 times per year at most. My brother's marriage lasted only 4 years. Dick was called into the Army. Charlotte moved in with her family. When Dick returned from the service, he discovered that he'd lost Charlotte. We were all saddened by this, and I don't think my children really understood why their Aunt Charlotte had been snatched from them. For decades, Charlotte remained a fond and fading memory. What a delight when our paths crossed not many years ago, and she now again remains an important person in my life. To return to my brother's life, he eventually informed us that he had married Phyllis Cochran with 2 small children, Michael and Sandy, whom he adopted. Phil was very gifted as a composer, a pianist, and as I recall, she had a pretty voice. She also had a way with the written word and wrote poetry. With music and writing at the core of both of our involvements, it is little wonder that we had great respect for each other. Phil, who developed leukemia, was the center of my brother's life, and he did everything to make her life more comfortable. Often Phil would call me in the night, maybe 2 a.m., and say, "Play for me." Not some classic you memorized, just let the violin talk to me. So my violin and I wove extemporaneous melodies for Phil. During these interludes, time did not exist. Phil outlived Dick, even afflicted as she was with that dreadful disease. Thomas Richard Patrick was given a military funeral. My son Bob wrote to Phil on his uncle's death to express his sympathy. Showing her magic with words, she wrote back, "The real bird has flown. His windmills remain for me to tilt. Ah, Don Quixote, be still." These 2 women, Charlotte and Phil, are extensions of my family when they married my brother. Phil was the creator. Charlotte was the appreciator. How lucky I am to have known them. When I married Burton, his family became mine also. The Coons lived in the family home on Brandstetter Street, just a few downhill blocks from our home on Beverly Way. The older brother, Burke Coon, drafted for service in the U.S. Army, was given all at once many shots to protect him from all sorts of diseases. The medical world in 1917 had so much to learn then compared to now. Those multiple shots changed the life of Burris, for he developed severe seizures. To take care for him when he was stricken, Burton and any other strong person would restrain him in an effort to keep him from harming himself. Because of these attacks, our children were kept away from him and uninformed about their uncle's illness. His younger brother, George B. Coon, Jr., who was called Boose or Boosie by everyone, had a keen sense of humor and was a great baseball player. He was a student in high school when I began my teaching there. It was Boose who triggered many disruptions in class. most of them laughable but distressing to me. When he graduated, he left town to find his future. I did not know Boosie well after he moved away, for I only saw him on his sporadic visits to Dunsmuir. Burton's older sister, Doris Geiger, lived in the family home, and the younger sister, Phyllis Spores, lived close by also. Neither had children, so when my three came along, Auntie Doris and Auntie Phil were thrilled and played an important role in the children's lives. All but Boosie lived in Dunsmuir. Happily, I became part of the Coon family. It is Burton's father, George, whom I must single out. The moment our first child was born, he quickly became forever Grandpa Coon. I can see him now, tall, erect, heavy gray hair, and a neatly trimmed Van Dyke beard. He was very helpful, and we became rather close. He kept me company when Burton was playing baseball away from home. For games in the Dunsmuir ballpark, Grandpa always went to root for his gifted son, Bones. Grandpa Coon babysat our three young ones, so Burton and I were able once in a while to attend card parties or dances. Those times allowed me the luxury of a social life. One time when I was dressed for a dance, my young son remarked, "You look like a real mother now." Often, when I was busy doing some household chore, Grandpa would come up and work in the garden. It was he who first planted all the daffodil and tulip bulbs. How gloriously beautiful they were in the spring. Occasionally, the Coon family, Doris, Phyllis, Burris, Boosie, had a Dutch feed. Grandpa Coon, I remember well, would come to visit, and as we talked, would rather wistfully breathe, "The girls are getting ready for a Dutch feed this evening. I don't care for any of that Dutch stuff like pig's feet, calf's tongue, Limburger cheese. Ooh, me." "Grandpa, I don't care for any of that stuff either. How would you like it if I prepared chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes, and baking powder biscuits?" "Daughter, that would be good. I'll be up for dinner with you and the children. What time?" And so he was there with a clean shirt and a pretty flower from his garden for me. I am certain that had I not had the help and loving support that Grandpa Coon so willingly gave, I would not be the person I am today. Alice and George Coon had 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, but no grandchildren. So when Burton told his family that I was expecting, the family was elated. For her first grandchild, Alice had ordered a baby crib. It arrived the very day that Alice Reiser Coon was buried. How sad that she would never see her first grandchild. In selecting a name for our first child, we chose Alice for her paternal grandmother and Jane for her maternal grandmother, Martha Jane. Alice Jane was royally greeted by my brother, for she was born on his birthday, April 4th, attended by Dr. Albert Newton. The year was 1930. The mother of my closest friend, Eleanor Van Fossen, made the comment, "It is fortunate that the baby was born 10 months after your marriage, for the town is talking." I wanted to choke her, though I'm not a violent person. Of course, we loved and thoroughly enjoyed Alice Jane. She walked at 9 months, spoke in sentences by 1 year. Her beautiful eyes and winning smile would capture anyone's heart. A very bright little girl, at age 4, she appeared in a church play in a role which required her to memorize lines. She did beautifully and was adorable. On December 18th, 1931, just 20 months after Alice Jane's birth, Robert Burton Coon arrived. He was born at home. The attending physician was Dr. Roger Campbell. Before Bobby's birth, I had been put on a very restrictive diet to control the size of the baby, so when Bobby appeared, he was like a tiny monkey, just skin and bones. Fortunately, he gained weight rapidly, and at 2, he was a darling little roly-poly. He had lovely, wide blue eyes like my mother's. Bobby was very active and was being groomed by his father to be a great baseball player, like his father. He even had a small baseball bat. Aunts and uncles adored their niece and nephew. My father was with us and working feverishly to finish the new fireplace. At 6 a.m., December 16th, labor pains gripped me. At 7 a.m., I told my father. His reaction I shall never forget. He had a dish rag in hand. He quickly wiped the stove, cleaned the counters, back to the stove. Somehow he did prepare breakfast for the little ones in Burton. By 11 a.m., I knew that my time was imminent. The Wattenbergers had promised to take me to the hospital, but when I phoned, I was told that Ralph was in Klamath Falls with his basketball team. Next, I called Eleanor Van Fossen to see if she could take me, and she did, but since her car was not working, she commandeered her Uncle Will's car. As we approached the railroad crossing, I prayed there would be no train going by, for had there been, Eleanor would have become a midwife. Not exactly her style. At the hospital, I was rushed to a room, and there, in very short time, Barbara Ann was born, attended by Dr. Roger Campbell. Barbara was 3 weeks late coming into this world and looked just like a month-old baby. Her birth was fast but difficult, as the result of which she was a blue baby, as I was to learn later. While I was hospitalized, 10 days back then, the Van Fossens cared for Alice Jane. Bobby was with Auntie Doris. For several weeks, Barbara struggled to breathe. Happily, I soon discovered, or did my father tell me, that nursing helped her to breathe. Those moments when the babe and I were one were quiet times, which I desperately needed. In time, Barbara came out from under the pulmonary bad effects of having been a blue baby. Barbara did not have my mother's soulful large eyes as her brother and sister had. However, Barbara's eyes twinkled. Her smile was infectious. She closely resembled a Cupid doll, delightfully adorable. When Barbara was 10 days old, Bobby developed pleural pneumonia. Auntie Doris and her neighbor Martha Stauffer cared for him day and night. Sometime later, when Doris was told that Bobby had had pleural pneumonia, she exclaimed, "If I'd known that, I could not have taken care of him." During his illness, Bobby forgot how to talk, forgot how to walk. I was not allowed to be with him for fear I might carry a germ to the newborn baby. After what seemed to me a long, long time, Bobby was carried to the window so I could see him. He did not know me and clung, poor sick baby, to Auntie Doris. How deeply that hurt. After his recovery began slowly to take place, was it 3 months? The doctor consented to bringing Bobby home. Then we began the arduous task of teaching one little boy how to walk again and how to talk once more. With a recovering child and a newborn, I expected far too much from Alice Jane. It was her help in so many ways when she was less than 5 years old that helped the family through this difficult period. Alice Jane was quite the little trooper. When Barbara was 4 years old, she could do a cute little shuffle dance which her aunts and uncles loved to see and coaxed her often to show off the steps. There was a frightening day after Alice Jane and Bobby had left to walk the 2 miles to school when I could not find Barbara in the house. I called Aunt Minnie to ask if she'd gone across the street and up the hill to the Arenman home. No, not here. I called the school to ask whether Barbara had somehow gone to school with her brother and sister. She was not there, so panic took over. The neighborhood men spread out to check the nearby creek, then the river. No little girl. In desperation, I went through the house again, calling her name. No response, but as I went into the children's bedroom, I noticed a pile of blankets on the floor. I moved some, and there she was, sound asleep. I rudely awakened her, then scolded her, and at last hugged her tightly, thankful that she was safe. So my children grew up, went to college, and on to productive lives of their own. Alice Jane, Bob, and Barbara, they are my children and my best friends, and I am very proud of each of them. The shuttle moves back and forth, carrying threads of different colors and textures, swoosh, across and back, under, over, across. Lo and behold, a fabric is beginning to take shape.